Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're doing a $30 budget build of the new Albaz Strike Structure deck. So I'm really excited for you guys because this deck is absolutely insane because of the new card, Branded Fusion, which is going to have such an impact on the meta and is just an amazing card. This deck has all sorts of amazing cards in it, from Pot of Extravagance, Effect Veiler, Ghost Ogre, all sorts of really awesome reprints for us to use to make a really awesome $30 budget build. This deck is hands down one of the craziest structure decks we've ever gotten, and I'm really excited to do this for you guys today because all we did for this particular deck is used 3 copies of the Albaz Strike Structure deck to make a really insane deck. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name description for a single video, getting a signed card sent in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron, along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. This deck is crazy right out of the box. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Fallen of Albaz. I think 3 is the perfect number for this deck because it has a really good effect and is the key card of the entire deck. But it also has a really awesome effect that if this card is normal or special summoned except during the damage step, you can discard any card to fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters on either player's field as fusion material, including this card. But you cannot use other monsters you control as fusion material. Basically, this card is super poly, which is really insane. We then play 3 copies of Spriggan's Kit. Spriggan's Kit is a really good 3-of as well, and a awesome new card that we got out of the Albaz Strike Structure deck that has the ability, if you have a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as a material on your field or in your graveyard, you can just special summon this card from your hand. And if it's normal or special summon, you get to add to your hand one of your branded spell or traps that's banished or in your deck or graveyard, and then place 1 card from your hand on the bottom of the deck, which may be a card that you don't need at the moment, while also getting you the crazy powerful Branded Fusion. We then play 3 copies of Tri-Brigade McCourier. McCourier is a really good hand trap for the deck that has the ability that when your opponent activates a monster effect while you control a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz, as a material quick effect, you can send this card from your hand or face from your field to the graveyard to negate that effect, which is an awesome effect. That this card is basically just a hand trap, and it's also a searcher because it has the ability to, if this card is banished, then you can add from your deck to your hand 1 Fallen of Albaz or a monster that mentions it, except another copy of this card. This card is a definite 3-of and is just such a good card because it's a hand trap and a searcher all in one. We then play 2 copies of Albion the Shrouded Dragon. This card is very neat for the deck because it has the ability this card's name becomes Fallen of Albaz while in the field or in the graveyard. And if this card is in your hand or grave, you can send a Fallen of Albaz or a branded spell from your hand to the or deck to the graveyard and apply the following effects based on where it was sent from. If it was from your hand, you get to special summon this card, or if it was from the deck, you get to place this card on the bottom of the deck, and if this card is placed from your hand on the bottom of the deck, you get to draw a card. Basically, this card is an upstart goblin, which is really good for the deck to be able to just get that extra draw, but I only played 2 copies of it because of Pot of Extravagance making it so we can't draw for the rest of the turn when we play that card, so I just played 2 copies of this card because it does count as Fallen of Albaz, which is really nice. We then play 3 copies of Keeper of Dragon Magic. I really like 3 copies of this card in the deck because it has the ability, if it's normal or special summon, you can discard a card and then add a polymerization spell card or a fusion normal spell from your deck to your hand, which is really insane because it lets you grab from your deck Branded Fusion, because this card lets you grab normal fusion spells from the deck by just discarding something that you already probably didn't need in your hand to be able to grab that crazy powerful fusion spell. It also has the ability you can reveal a fusion monster in your extra deck, and then you get to special summon 1 fusion material mention on it from your graveyard in face down defense position, and the only downside of this card is it locks you into fusion monsters, which in this particular build all we're playing is fusion monsters. So this card is insanely good in the deck. We then play a single copy of Artifact Scythe, because Artifact Scythe is just an insane card to be able to lock your opponent out of the extra deck by sending it to the graveyard with cards like your Branded Fusion, and then bringing it back to the field with Back to the Front, which is just absolutely insane during your opponent's turn to be able to lock them out of the extra deck. That is such a good combo for this deck to be able to use Branded Fusion, send this card and Fallen of Albaz to the graveyard to summon out a fusion monster, monster, and then bring it back to the field with Back to the Front to completely lock them down. We then play 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit because we did get 3 of this card in the structure decks with all 3 of them. This card is just a really good hand trap and is fantastic in this deck. And then we play 3 copies of Effect Veiler as well, which is really good to be able to negate monster effects. And it's really crazy that they included Effect Veiler and Ghost Ogre in this particular structure deck, because getting those hand traps is just really awesome for this $30 build. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing one of my favorite cards, which is going to be Called by the Grave. I'm so glad they kept Called by the Grave in this deck. We can only play a single copy of it because it's currently at 1, but it's still a crazy awesome card that's going to stop your opponent from using a hand trap while you're going into your plays. We then play a single copy of Goldsark. Goldsark is really good because you can send Courier from your deck to the graveyard to be able to use this effect, because when it's banished, you get that really crazy search effect. Play a single copy of Branded in White because it's a really good one-of in this deck. It's really helpful for this deck to have the single copy of this card. I don't feel like you need any more than this one card, because it has the ability that you can fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material, including a dragon monster. And you can also banish this card from the graveyard as a material if you use Fallen of Albaz as a fusion material from your hand, field, or banish itself from the graveyard. And then during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there to activate the effect of Fallen of Albaz this turn, you can set this card, which is really good because your Fallen of Albaz requires you to discard a card to be able to fusion summon. So this card is really good as a one-of in this build. We then play 2 copies of Branded Loss. Branded Loss is a card that I actually consider playing as a 3-of in this deck, but I ended up cutting it down to 2 so I could play the Branded in White. But this card is really good because it has the ability that the activation of cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summons a fusion monster cannot be negated, which pretty much makes this card a magical meltdown. And also your opponent cannot activate cards or effects while a monster is fusion summoned this way, which is really, really good. And it also has the ability, if you fusion summon a fusion monster, you can add a Fallen of Albaz or one monster that mentions it from your deck to your hand, which makes this card also a searcher, which is just insane. This card is really, really good for the deck. I wanted to play 3 copies of it, but I ended up just playing it as a 2-of so I could play a Branded in White. We then play 3 copies of the new broken card, Branded Fusion. This card is going to have such an impact on the meta and is just so good because it has the ability to let you fusion summon a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as a material from your extra deck using 2 monsters from your hand deck or field as fusion materials. And the only downside to this card is it locks you into fusion summons. That is not even that bad because you can summon out Albion and then use Albion to let you fusion summon into cards like Mirror Jade or into any of your crazy powerful fusion monsters that we have in the extra deck. It is such a good card in this deck to be able to play 3 Branded Fusion, and it's going to be such a broken card in the meta. We then play 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance just to help us draw a little bit more in this deck, because we can play multiple copies of Mirror Jade, Albion, all those other cards that we have in the extra deck. This card is just really, really good to be able to play in the deck, to be able to get that extra draw too, because we play pretty much 3 of all the really good cards. We then play 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More. Dark Ruler No More is really good because it can shut the opponent's field down while also being able to summon out a Fallen of Albaz to be able to fusion summon an opponent's monster away to go into a super powerful monster, so you don't have to worry about their monsters effects that are on the field. So this card is a really, really good 3-of to just shut the opponent's field down while you're going in for your plays. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps, because we do play a couple of traps in this deck. So for the traps, we're going to be playing a single copy of Branded Retribution. Branded Retribution is a really good counter trap that has the ability that when a spell or trap card or a monster effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster, return to the extra deck 1 face-up fusion monster you control or 2 fusion monsters in your graveyard that mention Fallen of Albaz as a material, and if you do, negate the activation. If you do that, destroy the card. This card is pretty much Solemn Strike while also being Pot of Avarice, which is just crazy good. It also has the ability that if you do that, you destroy the card, and then you can banish this card from your graveyard and then target a branded spell or trap in the grave, accept another copy of this card and add it back to your hand, being able to reuse your branded fusion all over again with this card. Then also has the ability that you can only use one branded retribution effect per turn, which is totally fine, because if it does get sent to the graveyard, you can just use its effect on the following turn to get branded fusion back and reuse it again. We then play a single copy of Judgment of the Branded, which is a good one-of in this deck because it has the ability let you target a level 8 or higher fusion monster that you control and destroy all monster your opponent controls with equal or higher attack than that monster. And then during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there to activate the effect of Fallen of Albaz, this turn you can set this card back to your field, which is really good because it basically turns your Fallen of Albaz into a free effect with just setting this card back to the field. Speaking of Back to the Field, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Back to the Front. Back to the Front is a trap version of Monster Reborn with the ability that you get to target a monster in the graveyard and special summon in defense position. And in this deck, it's actually better than Monster Reborn because you can set this card to your field while you have Artifact Scythe in the graveyard to then flip the Scythe, or flip this, bring back the Scythe to your field, and then lock your opponent out of the extra deck, which is insanely good. To be able to have one card to bring back any of your fusion monsters or bring back Artifact Scythe or Fallen of Albaz, any of those cards, this card is a definite 3-of. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. And since we are playing Pot of Extravagance in this deck because it was included in the structure decks, we're going to be playing a lot of 3-ofs. And since we are playing the structure deck, we already had to include a lot of 3-ofs because they only gave us about 6 different fusion monsters for this deck, but that's still really good. So for the monsters we're playing obviously 3 copies of Mirror Jade, the Ice Blade Dragon. This card is a crazy good because it has the ability that takes a Fallen of Albaz plus a Fusion, Synchro, XZ, or Link monster to summon this card. And you can only control 1 copy of this card. And then once per turn, quick effect, you can send a Fusion monster from your extra deck to the graveyard that mentions Fallen of Albaz as a material to banish 1 monster on the field. Also, this card can not use this effect during the next turn, which is not that big of a deal. It makes this card a little bit more balanced where you can use this card to be able to pop a card or be able to banish a monster on the field, which is really good. But you can't use it the following turn, which makes it really balanced. It also has the ability, if this card, or if this fusion summon card, in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card, then you can destroy all monster your opponent controls during the end phase of this turn, which is really good that it just board wipes the opponent. This card is absolutely a crazy good 3-of for this deck. We then play 3 copies of the Searing Dragon. This card is really good as well because it has the ability, it takes any dark monster plus a Fallen of Albaz to fusion summon this card. And if this card is fusion summon, you can discard a card to fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, except this card, by shuffling fusion materials mentioned on it into the deck from monsters on the field, graveyard, or face up that are banished. And for the rest of the turn, you can't attack, or this card can't attack, which is not that big of a deal because you're going to get a really powerful monster on the field. Also, you can't special summon monsters in your extra deck except for fusions, which in this deck, all we're playing is fusion, so that restriction might as well not apply. We then play 3 copies of Albion, the Branded Dragon. This card is going to be the broken card of the format, and I'm really excited to see what this card does for us in the TCG, because this card lets you use the ability that this card is going to be the one you're going to be using with Branded Fusion all the time, because it has the ability that if this card is fusion summoned, you can fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, except an Albion the Branded Dragon, by banishing fusion materials mentioned on it from your hand, field, or graveyard. This card lets you fusion summon into basically any of your monsters in the extra deck, which is really good, by just recycling your cards and banishing them out to be able to use them again. This card is so good in this deck and is a definite 3-of. It also has the ability that during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add to your hand or set a branded spell or trap directly from the deck. This card searches and puts a card on the field and is a miracle fusion all in one card. We then play 2 copies of Titaniclad because it's a good card to be able to summon with Branded Fusion or with your Albion in this deck. It's just a really good 2-of. We play 2 copies of Brigade, the Glory Dragon, because it's also a really good card to be able to fusion summon with your Albion or Branded Fusion. It's just a really good utility card in this deck. And then 2 copies of Iron Dash as well. I feel like 2, 2, and 2 of these cards really works out for this deck because you really don't need any of these cards in particular. You really have to get to your copy of Albion and then to your copy of Mirror Jade. These cards are basically just situational for what you need at the particular moment, so they're great 2-ofs in this particular deck. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's a crazy deck to be able to just think that you can take 3 of the Albaz Strike structure decks, mix them together, and make a really, really powerful, right out of the gate, powerful deck that could easily top locals and is just a really powerful deck. It's crazy to think that Branded Fusion is now on the TCG and is just going to have such an impact over here. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can become part of the notification squad, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.